Imagine spending your entire weekend just studying strategy.
Yeah.
Like you memorize probabilities, you watch hours of expert breakdowns.
You log hundreds of hours of actual practice.
Exactly. You feel completely prepared. And then a machine analyzes your performance and reveals that you are making the exact same 47 mistakes every single time you sit down to perform.
Yeah, you haven't been building a skill at all. You've just been deeply ingraining your flaws.
Right. Welcome to the deep dive. If you are a learner who loves pulling apart how things actually work and, why we fail even when we try our hardest, you are in the perfect place.
Absolutely.
Today, our source material comes from a poker training and analytics platform called RangeFlow, and specifically their RangeFlow AI tool. But our mission for this deep dive is not to teach you how to play cards.
No, definitely not.
We're taking this massive data set to uncover the hidden mechanics of how human beings actually master complex, high-pressure skills.
And the sources we are looking at today are incredibly revealing because they dismantle a few massive cultural myths. They just take a hammer to the idea of innate talent.
Oh, for sure.
But more importantly, they destroy the concept that just logging volume, putting in the hours is the answer to mastery.
Right, the 10,000-hour rule kind of thing.
Exactly. The core argument running through this entire text is stark, and frankly, it's a bit terrifying for anyone trying to learn a new skill. Putting in repetitions without immediate, accurate feedback does not make you better.
It actually hurts you, right?
Yes, it physically wires your brain to make your bad habits permanent.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sources highlight a really painful truth that anyone trying to get serious about anything, whether it's public speaking, coding, or, managing a team, can totally relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone does this.
You decide you want to improve. So you consume content, you watch hours of master classes, you scroll through strategy forums at 2 in the morning, reading about abstract concepts.
You feel that sense of momentum.
Yes, you feel like you are doing the work. Then, the next day, you step into the arena, and under pressure, you do exactly the same thing you always do.
It is the ultimate illusion of competence. Passive consumption makes us feel like we have acquired a skill, when scientifically, all we have really acquired is vocabulary.
Wow. We confuse familiarity with execution.
Exactly. And RangeFlow AI brings absolute receipts on this. They didn't just guess. They analyzed over 4 million real cash game hands.
4 million?
Yeah.
That is a massive data set.
4 million data points. And they found that the average thinking player, meaning someone who is actively studying and trying to play well, makes 47 specific, highly exploitable mistakes every single session.
Great. 47 mistakes.
Every session.
Every single session. And what's fascinating here is the demographic of that data. We are not talking about absolute beginners who don't know the rules of the game.
Right, they aren't rookies.
No, these are intermediate to advanced players who dedicatedly study the theory. But because they lack a system to catch their specific errors in real time, those 47 mistakes become completely invisible to them. They just repeat them on an endless loop. Reading this made me think about learning to ride a bike. Passive learning is, it's like reading a beautifully illustrated 400-page textbook on the physics of gyroscopic balance.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Like you can ace a written test on how a bicycle stays upright, but the second you sit on the seat and someone pushes you, your inner ear panics, your muscles tense up, and you crash into a mailbox.
Because the textbook didn't train your reflexes.
Exactly. But I have to push back on the sources here just a bit. Wait, if I'm a thinking player, and I am spending my weekends watching top-tier strategy videos and memorizing what cards to play, how on earth am I still making 47 mistakes a session?
It seems counterintuitive.
Shouldn't all that heavy theoretical knowledge protect me from making fundamental errors?
You would naturally assume so, but that ignores the neuroscience of how the human brain processes information under pressure. There is a massive difference between cold cognition and hot cognition.
Okay, break that down for me. Cold cognition is what?
When you are passively learning, like watching a 45-minute video of a professional navigating a complex scenario, your brain is in a cold state. Your heart rate is resting. You are not managing the fear of looking stupid or the adrenaline of losing real money.
You're just sitting on your couch with a coffee.
Exactly. You are just nodding along, telling yourself, oh yeah, I totally see why they did that. But when you are the one performing, your brain enters a hot state. Cortisol spikes, the amygdala gets involved.
Oh, so the survival instincts kick in.
Precisely that. And in that hot state, your brain cannot access the complex, fragile memories you built while passively watching a video.
Just panics and reverts.
It defaults to whatever neural pathways are the most thickly myelinated, meaning whatever actions you have physically repeated the most, even if they are fundamentally flawed.
So without immediate corrective feedback on your specific decisions while in a stressful environment, you're just logging hours in a hot state. You're cementing bad instincts.
Exactly. And the sources put a very real price tag on cementing those bad instincts. They measure this in what poker players call expected value, or EV.
Yeah, and for anyone unfamiliar, expected value is just the mathematical average of what a specific decision is worth over time. Like, if a move makes you $10 on average every time you do it, it has a positive expected value of $10.
Right, and the text shows that every time a player makes one of these 47 common mistakes, it costs them anywhere from $20 to over $100 in expected value.
That is a brutal bleed of resources, just bleeding money.
It really is. But the flip side of that math is incredibly hopeful. By fixing just 3 or 4 of these invisible leaks, a player could literally save $100 to $300 a single session.
Wow. That completely shifts the paradigm of improvement, doesn't it?
It does. The mandate changes from, I need to learn brilliant advanced new tricks, to a much more practical, I just need to stop bleeding chips in spots where I don't even realize I am making an error.
So if we follow that logic, we just fix the leaks. We study the theory, we patch our mistakes, and we play perfectly.
Right.
Because in poker, there is a concept the sources discuss called GTO, game theory optimal strategy. It basically means playing a mathematical style that is theoretically unexploitable.
Yes, the GTO trap.
It's like playing rock, paper, scissors, and perfectly randomizing your throws exactly 33.3% of the time each. No one can ever game your strategy. You're playing mathematically perfect chess.
Right, but the sources point out a maddening reality about that.
Yeah, that you can play perfect GTO and still lose a massive amount of money to a player who is just recklessly throwing chips around without a single thought about math.
Ah, the classic collision between pure theory and messy reality. When you play a game theory optimal strategy, you're assuming your opponent is also playing optimally.
Which they aren't.
Exactly. You're playing a solved mathematical game against an unsolved, highly emotional human being. Playing mathematically correct theory against someone who doesn't even know the math exists is often a fast track to frustration.
So what does this all mean? If playing the mathematically perfect way doesn't work, am I supposed to start playing worse just to beat bad players? Like, do I throw the textbook out the window entirely?
No, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the goal isn't to play worse. The goal is to play the player, not just the cards or the abstract math. RangeFlow refers to this concept as poker in poker.
Poker in poker. I like that.
It is the hidden meta strategy of the game. Going back to your rock, paper, scissors analogy, if your opponent is irrational and throws rock 80% of the time, playing a perfectly balanced 33% strategy is technically a mistake.
Right, you shouldn't play perfectly. You should just throw paper every single time until they adapt.
Exactly. You have to adjust your strategy to exploit the specific, irrational tendencies of the human being sitting across from you.
And this is where that 4 million hand dataset comes roaring back into the picture, because they used it to map out exactly how irrational human beings actually are.
They mapped the pool tendencies.
Yes, the pool tendencies, the average behaviors of massive groups of players, and the statistics are mind-blowing. I want to look at a few of these because they perfectly illustrate this meta strategy.
Let's hear them.
The first stat the AI uncovered is that 67% of players overfold to triple barrels on scary runouts.
Which is huge.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't spend their weekends in a casino, a triple barrel on a scary runout basically means someone aggressively betting 3 times in a row as the communal cards flipped on the table look increasingly dangerous.
Consider the psychology behind that statistic. It tells us that almost 7 out of 10 humans cannot handle escalating sustained pressure when the environment looks threatening.
They just cave.
Their survival instinct screams at them to abandon ship. Even if the mathematical odds suggest they should stay, they fold.
Then there's the second stat. 73% of recreational players will call way too wide on the flop, but then fold entirely too much on the turn.
That's a classic one.
Again, translating the jargon.
Yeah.
This means when the first 3 community cards are dealt, the flop amateur players will pay money just to see what happens next, even with terrible cards.
Just out of curiosity.
Right. But when the fourth card, the turn is dealt, and the bets get bigger, they suddenly panic and quit.
That is a beautiful, real-world example of how humans mismanage sunk costs versus rising stakes. On the flop, the price of admission is cheap, and human curiosity takes over. Let's just see one more card.
But then reality hits.
Exactly. When the turn hits and the financial pressure multiplies, reality sets in, and they just abandon the money they already invested.
And here's the third one that really caught my eye. 81% of aggressive players will completely shut down if you check-raise them on a paired board.
That's a massive exploit.
It really is, meaning you're playing against someone who's been bullying the table all night. The cards come out, and two of them are exactly the same, say 2 8s. You pretend to be weak by checking. The bully aggressively bets, and then you suddenly raise them back.
And 81% of the time, the bully instantly backs down.
They just fold.
Think about why this matters for you, the listener, regardless of your field. When you possess exact statistical insights into human irrationality like that, your entire approach to problem-solving changes.
It's not a guessing game anymore.
No, you no longer have to rely on some vague gut instinct or rigidly adhere to a theoretical chart. You transition to making data-driven adjustments based on human behavioral flaws.
It makes so much sense. If you have the data that tells you a certain person just loves to call bets out of curiosity, you don't waste your energy trying to bluff them. You just make them pay a little bit more every time you actually have a good hand.
What poker players call value betting thinner.
Exactly. Or if you are dealing with a hyper-aggressive bully, you don't try to outscream them. You set a trap, show a sudden flash of strength, and watch them fold 81% of the time.
Yeah.
You are exploiting the pattern.
But this raises an important question for our mission today. How do you actually train your brain to recognize those complex patterns and execute those exploits in real time?
Right, without getting completely overwhelmed by the chaos and speed of the live environment.
Exactly, because we already established that sitting back with a cup of coffee and watching instructional videos does not build those hot state neural pathways.
Now let's be realistic. Most of us cannot quit our day jobs to go grind 12 tables for 8 hours a day to get real-world experience. So how do we actually rewire our brains?
This is where RangeFlow system comes in.
Yeah, the alternative that RangeFlow advocates for is surprisingly compact. They outline a strict 20-minute daily active training system. It is rigidly broken down into 3 blocks.
Just 20 minutes.
Yep. 5 minutes reviewing flagged hands, 10 minutes doing scenario-based drills, and 5 minutes reading one bite-sized theoretical concept.
It sounds almost too simple.
It does. Now, looking at this, my immediate reaction was deep skepticism. Come on, 20 minutes a day. How can 20 minutes of tapping on a screen possibly compete with someone who sits down and watches 2 straight hours of heavy, intense strategy breakdowns on a Saturday afternoon?
Well, it comes down to the compound effect of active retrieval versus passive recognition. 20 minutes a day might sound trivial to a traditional learner.
Especially compared to a 2-hour study block.
But when executed consistently, that adds up to over 120 hours of intensely focused active training over a single year. The sources point out that most players don't achieve 120 hours of truly active, pressure-tested study in 5 entire years of playing.
That is wild to think about.
And the secret mechanism making this work lies entirely in those 10 minutes of scenario-based drills.
The interactive drill mode, where the app actually throws you into the middle of a hand.
Yes. You are dropped into a simulated scenario. The AI might present you with a situation where you are facing a massive check raise, or you have to calculate exactly how much to bet on the final card.
And the clock is ticking, right?
Crucially, yes, you are forced to make a decision and physically commit to it within a time limit. There is no pausing the video. There is no, oh, I totally would have done that after the expert reveals the answer.
You can't lie to yourself.
Exactly. You are forced to generate a response. And then the AI delivers immediate, unsparing feedback. It shows you the mathematical expected value of your choice, the range of possible hands, and the specific psychological pool tendencies we just analyzed.
You are getting the why instantly while your brain is still in that hot decision-making state.
That's the key.
And there is a really crucial detail the text emphasizes about the first 5 minutes of this system, the time you spend reviewing your own past performance.
Oh, this is my favorite part.
The sources stress that you shouldn't just look at the massive moments where you won a fortune or lost your shirt. You are instructed to hunt for the decision points.
The moments of friction.
Yeah, you look for the seemingly minor moments where you paused, the interactions where you felt uncertain or where you got overwhelmed, threw your hands up, and just went with your gut. because as the text beautifully puts it, that uncertainty is your curriculum.
That is such a profound insight for learning any complex skill, whether it is medical diagnostics or corporate negotiation.
It really is.
Human nature dictates that we focus on the spectacular outcomes, the massive victories, and the devastating failures. But the actual scaffolding of growth happens in the mundane moments of hesitation.
The gray areas.
Yes, hesitation is the exact boundary line of your current competence. If you can isolate exactly why you hesitated, feed that scenario into a simulator, and train that specific moment until the hesitation disappears, your baseline competence skyrockets.
Okay, so training in a controlled vacuum is one thing. You can drill these simulated scenarios on your phone while riding the train. But how does a learner take this disciplined, AI-drilled mindset and translate it to the absolute chaos of the real world?
The live environment is completely different.
Exactly, because anyone who has ever practiced a speech in the mirror knows that feeling where all your theory evaporates the second you step onto a stage and people stare at you.
That transition is exactly where the session-to-session framework comes into play. It is a structured protocol for bridging the gap between isolated, daily practice and actual live performance consistency.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because it challenges how most of us approach our tasks. Most people warm up for a high-pressure situation by just showing up.
They just walk in cold.
Right. You sit at the table, you wait for the dealer to pitch the cards, and you react. The sources compare this to stepping into a professional boxing ring without having thrown a single practice punch or stretched your muscles.
You might survive the first round, but you are absolutely not optimizing your chances.
Not at all. Instead, the framework demands a strict 5-minute pre-game routine. You review the notes from your last 3 sessions, and you pick exactly one thing to focus on for the night.
Not 5 things.
One. Just one. You tell yourself, tonight, no matter what else happens, my only goal is to stop calling large bets on the final card when my hand only beats a bluff.
By restricting the focus to a single variable, you are managing your cognitive load. If you try to fix 5 mechanical flaws simultaneously under pressure, your working memory crashes, and you revert to your oldest, worst habits.
You just overload the system.
Exactly. A single focal point anchors your attention. And then, once the performance actually begins, you have to maintain relentless in-game awareness. The text asks a very pointed question. What are you doing when you are not actively involved in a hand?
Right, because the vast majority of players are checking their text messages, ordering a drink, or just zoning out.
Wasting free information.
But the sources argue that this downtime is when you should be actively building a mental model of the environment. You are gathering entirely free data. You watch the table to see who is experiencing tilt, which is what poker players call emotional hijacking, when the amygdala takes over because they just suffered a bad loss.
You note who got wiped out an hour ago and is now playing terrified, trying to protect their last few chips.
Exactly. You spot the person who hasn't been dealt a good card all night and is visibly twitching with impatience. All of that behavioral data is just sitting there for the taking. But you miss all of it if your head is buried in your phone.
And then, after the game concludes, comes the most critical and most often ignored final step of the framework.
The post-game 15-minute window.
Yes.
The sources state that immediately after you finish a session, whether it's a poker game, a tough client meeting, or a performance review, you have a fleeting 15-minute window where your memories of your internal state are still fresh.
Before the adrenaline completely wears off.
Right. Before you go to sleep, before you open a beer to decompress, you must pull out your notes and flag 2 to 3 specific moments of uncertainty. You document the exact variables that confused you.
You feed those decision points into the AI system.
And that becomes the raw material for your 5-minute review the very next day.
What is truly beautiful about this entire session-to-session framework is how it systematically neutralizes the emotional roller coaster of variance.
It takes the sting out of losing.
It really does.
Right.
For most people operating in a high-variance environment, a good outcome makes them feel like a genius, and a bad outcome makes them question if they have any talent at all. They attach their ego to the result.
Which is so exhausting.
But by implementing this framework, you treat every single interaction as just another data point, rather than an isolated, emotionally charged judgment of your worth. You rely on a systemic, cyclical process that does not change, regardless of whether you feel incredibly confident or deeply doubtful on any given Tuesday.
It totally neutralizes the ego. You are never truly losing. You are just collecting high-fidelity data for tomorrow's drill.
Precisely.
So bringing this all together for you listening, Whether you ever plan to set foot in a casino or you just want to get remarkably better what you do every day, the sources here reveal a universal truth about mastery.
Passive consumption of information is a trap.
Yeah, watching the master classes, reading the articles, nodding along in agreement, it gives you the warm, fuzzy illusion of competence. It feels like hard work. But only active, targeted, scenario-based feedback actually changes how your brain behaves under pressure.
It really is an exercise in finding your own hidden leaks. We all possess these specific, repeatable, highly exploitable mistakes that we don't even know we're making.
Those 47 mistakes.
Exactly. The absolute key to mastery is developing the humility to let data, rather than your own ego, identify those leaks and then doing the quiet, unglamorous daily work of systematically plugging them.
Is like finally turning the lights on in a dark room. You finally get to see the exact pieces of furniture you've been tripping over for the last 5 years. It's incredibly empowering.
It is empowering, but, it also leaves us with a deeply provocative implication to consider as we step back into the real world.
Okay, what's that?
Well, we have just explored how an artificial intelligence can analyze 4 million data points and definitively prove that human beings predictably make the exact same 47 irrational, emotional mistakes in a game built entirely around deception and hiding your intentions.
Right.
This raises an important question. If an algorithm can map our irrationality so perfectly at a card table, imagine what happens when corporate algorithms and data brokers start applying this exact same exploitative framework to the rest of our lives.
Wow, wow.
If human behavior is this predictably flawed when we are actively trying to be unpredictable, how easily are automated systems currently exploiting our hidden leaks when we negotiate our salaries, consume our news, or make our daily purchases, all while we blindly believe we are fully in control?